major legal setback has hit the Donald Trump administration after a U.S. federal judge struck down a policy that suspended the processing and issuance of immigrant visas to citizens of 75 countries, including Nigeria. The ruling, delivered by U.S. District Judge Janet Vargas in Manhattan, challenged one of Trump's administration's controversial immigration measures and could have significant implications for Nigerians and other applicants affected by the suspension. The policy, introduced by the U.S. State Department, placed a temporary hold on immigrant visa processing for nationals of the affected countries. U.S. authorities had justified the measure by arguing that applicants from the countries were considered at high risk of becoming a public charge by relying on government-funded welfare programs after entering the United States. But Judge Vargas rejected that reasoning, ruling that the State Department had exceeded its legal authority. The judge described the policy as unlawful and concluded that the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, did not have the statutory power to impose such a blanket suspension based primarily on the nationality of visa applicants. The ruling could therefore provide relief for Nigerians and other foreign nationals whose immigration applications were affected by the policy. The visa suspension took effect on January 21st and affected applicants from countries across Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, the Middle East, Europe, and Latin America. Nigeria was among the countries included on the list. Other affected African countries included Ghana, Cameroon, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Senegal, Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Kenya's regional neighbors, and several other states across the continent. The policy also covered countries such as Brazil, Colombia, Jamaica, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Russia, Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. The Trump administration argued that the policy was necessary to protect the U.S. welfare system. Officials maintained that some immigrants could become dependent on federal, state, and local government assistance after arriving in the country. The administration also pointed to statistics it said showed significant levels of public assistance among immigrant households from some of the affected countries. Trump had previously highlighted figures concerning welfare dependency among immigrant countries, including a figure of about 33.3% for Nigerian immigrant households receiving some form of public assistance. The administration subsequently used the figures to support its argument for stricter immigration screening. Under the policy, consular officers were instructed to scrutinize applicants' financial circumstances and determine whether they were likely to become dependent on public resources. The directive reportedly went beyond traditional financial screening and included factors such as an applicant's age, health, and previous use of certain government assistance. But the court found that the policy went too far. In her ruling, Judge Vargas said the suspension effectively allowed the State Department to categorically prohibit immigrant visa issuance based on nationality. She concluded that such a move conflicted with federal immigration law. The judge's decision centered on the statutory structure governing immigrant visa processing. According to the ruling, Congress had established a legal framework for immigration and consular processing that did not give the Secretary of State the broader authority claimed by the administration. The judge therefore concluded that the January directive represented an unlawful departure from that framework. The case was brought by immigrant rights organizations, including the Catholic Legal Immigration Network and African Communities Together. U.S. citizens sponsoring relatives were also among those challenging the policy, alongside visa applicants from countries affected by the suspension. The plaintiffs argue that the administration had unlawfully blocked people from obtaining immigrant visas based on nationality and improperly expanded the State Department's authority. The court ultimately sided with the challengers. The ruling comes as the Trump administration continues its broader immigration crackdown. Since returning to office, Trump has introduced and pursued a series of measures designed to tighten immigration controls, strengthen border enforcement, and increase scrutiny of foreign nationals seeking entry into the United States. The administration has repeatedly argued that stronger immigration restrictions are necessary to protect national security, prevent illegal immigration, and reduce pressure on Americans' public services. The visa suspension was part of that wider strategy. The State Department had instructed U.S. diplomatic missions to hold processing for applicants from the listed countries. In a cable sent to U.S. missions, consular officers were reportedly directed to refuse certain applicants whose visas had already been authorized for printing but had not yet been printed. The government said the suspension was necessary to allow a comprehensive review of immigration procedures. Officials argue that the review would ensure the highest level of screening and prevent foreign nationals from exploiting the U.S. welfare system. Principal Deputy State Department spokesperson Tommy Pigott defended the policy at the time. He argued that the State Department had long-standing authority to determine whether prospective immigrants were likely to become a public charge. The administration's position was that immigration from the 75 countries should remain paused while officials review the system. But the latest court ruling now places that legal argument under serious pressure. For Nigerians, the development could be particularly important because the United States remains a major destination for Nigerians, immigrants, students, professionals, and families seeking to reunite with relatives already living in the country. The ruling does not mean every Nigerian visa applicant will automatically receive a visa. Applicants will still have to meet the normal requirements under U.S. immigration law, undergo security and background checks, and satisfy other conditions applicable to their particular visa category. While the ruling changes is the legal status of the blanket suspension that targeted applicants from the 75 countries. The decisions also sends a broader message about the limits of executive power in immigration policy. The Trump administration has argued that the executive branch needs substantial flexibility to protect American interests and control immigration. The plaintiffs, however, argue that presidential immigration policy must still operate within the limits established by Congress. Judge Vargas' decision therefore places the State Department's authority directly at the center of the dispute. The administration could potentially challenge the ruling through the U.S. appeals process, meaning the legal battle may not be over. However, the decision represents a significant victory for immigrant rights organizations and affected visa applicants. It also offers a potential reprieve for Nigerians who were caught up in the suspension. The key question now is how the Trump administration and the State Department will respond to the ruling and whether the government will appeal. For thousands of prospective immigrants, families waiting for reunification, and applicants whose visa processing was disrupted, the outcome could determine whether their applications move forward or face another round of legal uncertainty. The case has once again highlighted the tension between the Trump administration's aggressive immigration agenda and the legal limits imposed by U.S. immigration law. And for Nigerians watching the development closely, the message from the U.S. courtroom is significant. A policy that has temporarily placed their immigrant visa applications on hold has now been declared unlawful by a federal judge. For more updates, stay with us on News Express. I am Cassie Tony.